how to build and deploy a RIFE2 application using Jenkins. Here's today's starting point. I have a Jenkins LTS controller version 2.387.1. Attached to this controller, I have an agent that has a number of CLIs installed on it. We'll get into the details of those in a few moments. There's also a sample repository for this video. The link to that repository is down in the description. So you might be asking yourself, okay, what is RIFE2? Well, RIFE2 is a framework to create web applications with modern Java. It's not meant to replace Spring Boot or other frameworks. It's just a different framework. So what I wanted to do is to be able to create a basic web application, package it up as a container image, scan it with a handful of different scanning tools, and then deploy it, and then push that image to Docker Hub, and then deploy that image from Docker Hub out to fly.io. Now, if some of those names sounded familiar to you, I've done videos about a number of these things, so I'll be calling those out as we go through the rest of this video. Now, if we take a look at RIFE2 documentation here, the quick start basically is this is all I need to have a fully functioning web app. I'll just get a page back that says hello world. But how does this get generated? Well, if we take a look at the getting started documentation for RIFE2, since this is a Java-based application, I could use Maven or Gradle. But to make things even simpler, the author of this framework provides a tool called Build. I'm calling it Build. It's spelled BLD, so I'll just call it Build. And that makes it super simple to work within the RIFE2 ecosystem. So when I created my first project that we're going to take a look at in just a moment, I had installed the Build tool and then followed the instructions for getting started with Build. And in my case, what I did, since I'm running on Mac OS, I did a brew install for Build, and then I created the application by saying build create hello app. And from there, I checked it in, and that's what we're going to take a look at right now. So the output from Build created everything that you see here except for the Dockerfile and the Jenkinsfile, and really the README. And really one more, fly.toml, because we need that for interacting with fly.io. So when this created, if I go to source, main, Java, we can see my app site, which gave me the exact same thing that we saw over on the quick start on the main site. So that's all that I need for right now is, can I get there or not? Now let's go back up into our repository and take a look at a couple of the extra things that we're doing. Let's just go to the Jenkins file to begin with, because from there we can branch out and check out the other things that exist. So we're saying agent any. Well, we have only a single agent, and that agent has all of the tooling on it that we need. What is the tooling? Well, if we take a look at that, obviously we need Java. When the global build application created the project for me, it also created a version of build within the project that I can check in. So I'm going to need build to do the things. So build is actually checked into my application. Think of it sort of like what we see when we use Maven W or Gradle W. We have build available to us within the application, so we don't have to have a specific version installed on our agent. I need to have flyctl in order to interact with Fly. I'm going to be using Grype and Trivy. Now I've done videos separately about both Grype and with Trivy before. So what I'm wanting to do is build my container image, and then I'm going to scan those images to make sure they are clean before actually pushing it out to Docker Hub. And then, because we're talking about Docker Hub, I also need to have Docker installed. So on the agent, I have Java, I have flyctl, Grype, Trivy, and Docker. So in the very first stage that we're running in our Jenkins file, we're going to just verify that everything exists there before we even move on, because if something like this fails, then we don't need to go back. Now, before we go through the rest of these, let's take a quick look at our environment variables. I've set up Docker Hub credentials that we're going to be referencing as dhcreds. I've also set up a Fly API token, which has already been pre-set up for me as well. Now, if you've not gone in and set up tokens at either Fly or at Docker Hub, there's other videos that talk you through how to do that. The links for all those videos are also down in the description. I'm setting my image name because I'm going to need to be referencing my image name in a couple of different places, and also the image version. And then finally, I'm specifying the Fly app that it's going to be deploying to once we actually deploy to Fly. So let's get into what we're really going to be doing inside of the Jenkins file. So we do our check to make sure everything is there available on our agent. Then we do a build, download, purge. Now you can go into the RIFE2 documentation to understand why you would do download and purge together. Just understand download and purge. Then I'm going to do a clean compile, just standalone. I'm just saying I'm going to clean it up and do a compile. And then I can do a precompile. Precompile is precompiling any of the templates that we have within the application. and then I'm going to run the test, and then I'm going to build the Uber jar. Now, in my case, I'm packaging everything up as a single jar, and that's going to be going inside of the container image. Now, I could have just run build Uber jar, and the lifecycle would have covered everything that was here from the clean compile down through Uber jar. I would have still had to have done download purge. But in my case, what I wanted to do is I wanted to break these out separately because if I had any problems, I wanted to go ahead and isolate it at the end. So in my case, yes, I'm being redundant here with UberJar because if you look at the output, which we will as we go through, you're going to see the same output in UberJar that you would see at each of these stages. Again, I'm just being explicit to see what happens at each one of these stages. If there's a failure, I want to just lock it into that one place. Now that we've built the jar, we're going to be building our container image. So we'll just say Docker build and using dot in our image name and image version. Then we're going to be scanning that image. Now, if you've watched the Grype video from before, there's a new parameter that I've added here. And I'm saying fail on negligible. So what that means with Grype is if it finds any problems at all, any, within that image, the stage at this point is going to fail, which is what I want because what I'm going for is I want to have 0 CVEs in that image before I even push it up to Docker Hub. So I'm checking it and really cranking down with Grype. Is anything happening inside of this image or not from a CVE perspective? I want it to be 0. So I'm saying fail on negligible. If it finds anything, fail it. Then I'm also doing something similar with Trivy. The way that they handle that is by using exit code 1. So if Trivy finds anything at all, then I'm going to have it return an exit code of 1, which will cause this step to fail. So I'm building the image, I'm scanning it with Grype. If everything passes Grype, it's going to go to Trivy. If it passes Trivy, then we go ahead and log into Docker Hub. We push our image up to Docker Hub, and then we're going to deploy our application out to Fly. Now, Fly understands, because of how I'm specifying this image name and image version, it will go and pull it from Docker Hub and deploy it out to Fly. Again, if you haven't watched the Fly video, the link to that is also down in the description. Finally here, we'll do a Fly status just to see how it's going. And then on my post always, I'm going to go ahead and remove the image that is on the local agent, just so we're cleaning up after ourselves. I'm going to log out of Docker Hub. And finally, I'm going to clean out the workspace. So I'm just doing a big cleanup at the end of the job. That way, when it runs again, I've got a nice, fresh, pristine agent to do all the work on. Let's go back into our controller and let's verify a few things here. So we already have our job set up pointing at that Jenkins file. If I go into Manage Jenkins, Manage Credentials, I have my Fly API token already set up. That is a secret text type credential. Then I also have my DH creds set up. That is a username password type credential. But with Docker Hub, you need to go and get a token and use the token as the password. Again, if you've not done that, there's a separate video for that. For more details, link for that down in the description. Now, one more thing I forgot to go ahead and take a look at. Let's take a look at our Dockerfile. Because remember what we're doing is we are going to be putting that UberJar that we created into our image. So we take a look at our Dockerfile. What I'm using is a chain guard image for OpenJDK 17.0.6. I'm being explicit in the version of Java that I want to use. I'm also using chain guard because what should happen, since I'm using that image, is there should be 0 CVEs on that base image. I'm going to copy in my UberJar into the image. I'm going to go ahead and expose 8080 because by default, when I run java-jar myapp010, that's going to start up the process listening on 8080. So I need to expose 8080 out, and Fly is going to understand how to process that. Because if we take a look inside of our Fly toml, I'm exposing the internal port as 8080. Again, all of these details around Fly were completely covered in a different video. But the key part here is I'm trying to build an image that has 0 CVEs. And before pushing that image up to Docker Hub, I'm going to be scanning it with 2 different tools, make sure they're in agreement. And if they're in agreement, there's no problems. Then we go ahead, push it out, and then fire off the flyctl process to go ahead and deploy that app. Now, before we go ahead and check that out, let's go over to Fly. We can see right now, I don't have any running apps. I have this Fly purple builder, but that's not actually the application. That's just a builder process that I'm not using here. Let's go back over into our controller. We'll go to RIFE2, and let's click on Build Now. Okay, now that the job's finished, let's go ahead and go back up top, and we'll work our way through the log. So we can see here, once we get past the initial setup, we have our Java, build, flycutl, Grype, Trivy, and Docker versions. Everything looks good there. Then we get into our build, download, purge. So then that's creating the base information for RIFE2. We do a clean compile, a precompile, our test. We can see our output from our tests here. We can also see a summary of that. Everything looks good there. We build our Uber jar. Now, if we were to take a close look at each one of these separate stages that we had gone through, we would see something similar to compilation finished successfully, and the templates, that's our precompile. And this is the 2 steps here are for creating the Uber jars. Now, the Uber jar needs the jar before it can create the Uber jar. So that's just the life cycle for that. So from a RIFE2 perspective, we now have our Uber jar ready to put into our container. So now we're going to be doing our Docker build. So now we get through that. The image is created fine. Then we run it through Grype with fail on negligible. We can see from a Grype perspective, there were no vulnerabilities found. We do the same basic thing with Trivy. We're including our exit code once. So if Trivy finds anything at all, it's going to fail. And again, with Trivy, we see there's 0 vulnerabilities found there. Then we log in, we push our image up to Docker Hub. That succeeds. Then we set our fly region to Miami, and then we do a deploy of the image. Now, in our case, I pushed the image up to Docker Hub, but I really didn't need to because what flycuddle deploy ended up doing is it was searching for the image. It found it locally and just pushed the image directly from my container. If I wanted it to actually pull from Docker Hub, what I should have done is I should have gone ahead and removed that image that was just created after it has been pushed to Docker Hub, and then Fly would have pulled it from Docker Hub. But in this case, this is what happened. So it pushed the image up to Fly. It started the app, and we can see from a Fly status perspective, my app is running and appears to be healthy in Miami. Well, let's go back over to Fly. We can see my RIFE2 app is there. And if I go ahead and open up this link and take a look at it, we can see the output is hello world, my app, which if we go back and take a look at our raw source code, what we'll see, source main Java, my app site, we'll see that the output is referencing a template called hello. We'll take a look at the hello. So we'll say source main resources templates, hello HTML, and we can see the output from this is hello world, my app. If you have any questions or comments, you can reach out to us on Twitter at CloudBees. If this video was helpful to you, give us a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed to CloudBees TV yet, why not? Take a moment, click on that subscribe button, and then ring that bell, and you'll be notified anytime there's new content available on CloudBees TV. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next video.